my name is Jamey Volker, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher with the National Center for Sustainable Transportation within ITS Davis. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my coolest ongoing projects. It's actually been going on for a couple of years, but it's getting a lot of press recently and a lot of policy attention. So I wanted to go through it and share it with you today. All right. So the tool I'll be discussing today, the project, is the California Induced Travel Calculator, which we built back in 2019 and have been maintaining it and improving it ever since, as well as providing assistance to those folks who are using it. So what the Induced Travel Calculator is essentially a back of the envelope calculator that provides an order of magnitude estimate of the additional vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, which is what I'll be referring to throughout the presentation, induced by expanding roadway capacity. And the calculator applies to a wide array of roadway capacity expansion projects within California. But before discussing the calculator in more detail, let me back up and give some more context and describe the induced travel phenomenon. All right, so we have to start here by thinking about what the historical approach to congestion management has been. And typically the historical approach has been to increase automobile capacity. So we have a congested area. We think, our first thought goes to building new roadways or adding lanes to existing roadways. And this isn't just historical, this is still routinely done. A particularly blatant and grandiose example of this was the original version of Senate Bill 319, proposed by Senator Morlock back in early 2019. And what this bill would have done in the original form would have added lanes along the entirety of Interstate 5 and State Route 99, with the ostensible purpose of reducing congestion and greenhouse gas emissions even in the state. And the capacity expansion provisions were ultimately removed from the amended bill, and it never passed in any event. But there are numerous examples of smaller expansion projects that have been proposed, are under construction, or have been recently completed on the same two highways. For example, the I-5 North County Enhancements Project and other I-5 projects in Los Angeles, and State Route 99 South Stockton 6-lane project, which was completed a few years back. And so if we're trying to understand where our heads are at when we're proposing these capacity expansion projects, this is a useful flow chart here, which illustrates the historical approach to congestion management. So you start here, you have traffic congestion, you have air pollution as a problem that you want to solve, and that leads into the proposed solution. Why not just add a lane or build a new roadway that will reduce the congestion, and because vehicle speeds go up, maybe it can also reduce air pollution, which is the intended effect: reduce congestion and reduce air pollution. So the problem, though, with this approach, which makes some conceptual sense, the problem is that adding capacity often does not end in a steady state of reduced congestion and faster speeds. It actually has the unintended effect of inducing more auto travel on the expanded corridor. Which brings me to the phenomenon of induced travel. And the induced travel effect can be explained by basic economic principles of supply and demand. As the cost of a good decreases, consumption of that good generally increases, and the same tends to be true here with driving. So one way that driving can become cheaper is when roadway capacity is added in congested areas, or areas with minimal accessibility, or even areas with unsafe or low-speed roads to begin with. And when you add that capacity, it reduces the time cost of driving, at least initially, because it reduces congestion or otherwise makes it faster and easier to access places along the expanded route. In turn, then, the reduction in the cost of driving leads to increased consumption. It increases vehicle miles traveled, and more specifically, what the effect it causes is, in the short term, people take advantage of the reduced cost of driving by taking longer trips, by making more frequent trips, by shifting modes, maybe from transit or from active travel or even from carpooling, or making route shifts. So it could be shifting to longer routes than they would have done previously, even if they're accessing the same destination. So even if they're not accessing a further destination, making a longer trip for that reason. And then in the longer term, there are effects as well. So you can have household and firm business relocation throughout the metro area, inducing sprawl and the like. And you can even have induced migration to the area, which increases demand. So you have someone from a different region or a different state that says, "Oh, travel looks really easy in this one area." That is going to be a factor in our decision as to where to move next. And so then, with the additional VMT from all of those behavioral changes, congestion can return to pre-capacity expansion levels relatively quickly. So instead of this, instead of this intended effect of steady state congestion relief, you end up getting this feedback loop where the reduced congestion and the lower time cost of driving end up inducing more driving, which then increases congestion and can start the whole process over again in this feedback loop shown here. So this comic illustrates the effect pretty nicely, and I think this is something that many of us have experienced, where we get frustrated sitting in traffic and grumble about needing more lanes. But then even after the roadway is expanded, we ultimately find ourselves sitting in traffic yet again. And the problem is that environmental reviews and cost benefit analyses for these roadway expansion projects often don't fully or accurately account for this induced travel rebound effect. And that has major implications for our ability to estimate and achieve VMT and greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So now you might be thinking, as transportation experts yourselves, that travel demand models, don't they already capture the induced travel effect in their forecast? And the answer, yes and no, but in general, they don't fully capture the effect. So many models, and particularly traditional four-step models, do not include all the feedback loops necessary to capture the behavioral changes caused by capacity expansion. So for example, not many models feed changes in estimated travel times back into the trip distribution or trip generation stages of the model, which ignores the possibility that improved travel times from a capacity expansion will, A, increase the number of trips that households and freight operators choose to make, or B, cause them to choose more distant trip destinations. And neither do most models, feed changes in estimated travel times back into assumptions about the growth and distribution of population and employment. However, there have been improvements there with land use modeling tools like Urban Sim. In addition, beyond these feedback loops, travel demand models results can often be quite noisy, especially for smaller capacity expansion projects, which inhibits your ability to get a kind of accurate estimate of induced travel. And the models, especially activity-based models that are becoming more common today, can be expensive and quite time-consuming to run. All right, and so that's why we decided to develop the induced travel calculator. There's a need to estimate accurately and fully induced travel, yet the methods that were out there, weren't quite doing the job as well as could be. And so what our calculator does, basically it's a simple sketch tool. It's a back of the envelope calculator that provides an order of magnitude estimate of induced VMT. And it uses elasticity estimates from the peer-reviewed empirical research, as well as roadway data from Caltrans on both lane miles and VMT. And so what the elasticity is, I won't go into much detail here, but basically you have the equation here. The elasticity is the change in VMT divided by the change in lane miles. So an elasticity of 1 would mean that a 10% increase in lane miles would lead to a 10% increase in VMT. And so what the calculator, this is what it does, provides this order of magnitude estimate. And where does it do that? For what types of projects are we getting these estimates? And so our calculator applies to a wide array of roadway capacity expansion projects in California. And more specifically, the calculator applies to projects that would add general purpose lanes, high occupancy vehicle lanes, or high occupancy toll lanes to major publicly managed roadways in the state. So the major roadways that applies to are class 1, 2, or 3 facilities. So that's interstate highways, other freeways and expressways, and class 3 facilities are other principal arterials, like Highway 13 in the Bay Area, for example, or Arden Way in Sacramento, or Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles. And then in terms of geography, and this is just constrained by the available empirical evidence on induced travel elasticities, but our calculator applies to California's projects within California's urbanized counties. So those are counties within a metropolitan statistical area, and there are 37 of those urbanized counties in the state. So after we built the calculator, my colleagues Amy Lee and Susan Handy and I used it to help assess how well environmental review documents for major capacity expansion projects in California actually addressed VMT. Unsurprisingly, this is kind of what we expected to find, and this is one reason that we decided to build this calculator in the first place. We found that these environmental review documents did not do a great job. So we have a paper out in the Transportation Research Record that details this analysis much more. But just a brief overview of what we found, quantitatively, only 3 of the 5 documents reported estimates of induced VMT. And all 3 estimates were lower than what we estimated using the calculator. And then in 2 of the 3 cases where an induced travel induced VMT estimate was provided, the estimates were actually an order of magnitude lower than what we estimated with the empirical research-based calculator. And so, overall, our results provided additional evidence that environmental analyses have often failed to consistently discuss, and let alone estimate, the induced travel effects of highway capacity expansion projects. And that's one way in which the NCST calculator can hopefully be used and be useful going forward. Indeed, Caltrans has actually recommended using the calculator for exactly that purpose. So in its 2020 transportation analysis framework, the cover page pictured here on the slide, Caltrans recommends using the induced travel calculator where feasible to estimate induced VMT from state highway system projects in urbanized areas. And then beyond Caltrans, I mentioned this at the outset, but the calculator has spawned whole lots of press and also use among many advocate groups. And most recently, we've, beyond just people using our calculator for environmental analysis of projects or for advocacy purposes, we've actually been helping other groups adapt the calculator to additional geographies. So for example, we just helped the Rocky Mountain Institute in partnership with NRDC and a few other groups develop a calculator for the entire US as well as Puerto Rico. And that calculator also includes greenhouse gas emissions estimates, which is a cool addition to the induced travel calculations. And so that calculator, if you're curious to check it out, it's called the Shift calculator. It's pictured here on the slide as well. And that's up online already. So all in all, I think the calculators had a pretty widespread impact. And yeah, pretty exciting to see it develop and be used throughout policy, environmental analysis, and advocacy. It's been a pleasure to work on this, and I'm excited to keep maintaining it and improving it as we go. All right, so that sums it up. Please check out the calculator online or shoot me an email if you have any questions. Thanks so much.